You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers. Welcome to Java Off Heap episode 64. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our recording for July, and it's going to be a fun one because finally vaccinations rolled out, and a lot of the crowd is vaccinated. So in this particular case, I am still remote, working from the West Coast, but the rest of the gang is actually doing this the way we started it, which is sitting down in a bar and having a drink and just talking about technology like geeks. So it's going to be a very fun episode. We also have a guest, but before I introduce him, let me just introduce first the co-host. For those who don't know, my name is Freddy. I'm one of the principal engineers here at Expedia, author, speaker, Seattle Java User Group, co-organizer and Java champion. And I'm here with my usual suspects, which they are together in the flesh at the RoundHouse.
Yep, we're here at the RoundHouse in Aurora. This is Bob Paulin, independent consultant from Chicago, Apache Software Foundation member, Java champion, and CJUG board chair.
Hey, this is Josh. I'm here at the RoundHouse as well, enjoying the lovely Chicagoland weather here. And I'm a Java EE and Jakarta EE developer, and also an Oracle database administrator by day. I'm a Java champion and author, and that's me.
I'm Michael Manella, Director of Engineering at VMware on the Spring team, author, speaker, Java champion, chairman of the board for the Reactive Foundation, curmudgeon at large.
Right. And we have a guest who joins us again for a recap of a continuation of the conversation we started probably like 6 or 7 months ago now. Cedric.
Hello. Hi. I am Cedric Hurst. I am the principal and founder of a consulting company called Spantree Technology Group. We are an awesome team that works with awesome clients. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. I do languages all across the board: Java, Python, Kotlin, Node, TypeScript, little Go. I'm kind of all over now.
and like whatever tool fits the job, right?
Pretty much, yes.
All right. Before we dive in, I wanted to thank our sponsor for this podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform that integrates with over 450 technologies, including AWS services, Docker, and Kubernetes. Datadog's platform brings together metrics, tracers, and logs in one place so you can get full visibility into your environment and improve your application performance. With machine learning-based alerts, customizable dashboards, and distributed tracing, Datadog makes it easy to unify disparate data sources so you can troubleshoot faster. Start your free Datadog trial today. Listeners of this podcast will receive a free t-shirt once you install the agent and create one dashboard. Visit javaoffheap.com/Datadog to get started. Again, that URL is javaoffheap.com/Datadog. We thank them for keeping the mics hot and the beers and the the old fashions flowing. So definitely give them a shot, and we thank them for sponsoring this podcast. All right. So with that, let's dive into it. We have a lot of ground to cover. So first are the events. JAX London. Who put this one in?
That's Josh here. I put that in. This looks like it's going to be a very interesting event. It's a hybrid event. You can actually buy tickets for the online portion, the hybrid portion, or you can buy an in-person ticket. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more conferences this way. But it'll be a pretty good conference. It looks like a pretty big one over there, JAX London.
Perfect.
This one's got the program already set. It's all out to go. It's just if you want to be an attendee, you can either be a remote attendee or in person.
Correct.
Yep. All right.
Got it. The next one, EclipseCon.
EclipseCon, more than just the IDE, right? Eclipse has pretty much got quite a bit here in the open source arena nowadays. So This will be a big conference. It goes from October 25th through the 28th. It's online. If you want to learn about the IDE or MicroProfile or Jakarta E or anything else Eclipse, this is where you want to be. So go check it out.
Actually, right, since they host the Jakarta EE working group, right? So
well, hold on. There's actually I don't know how much Jakarta EclipseCon is going to cover because the next one.
Well, yes, we have Jakarta One LiveStream. That's going to be happening on December 7th.
That's 2 months later. They can just repeat all the content. Nobody will notice.
Yeah. Actually, though, if you go to the Jakarta One LiveStream website, you'll see that they have a live stream in different countries happening anytime between now and early next year, I think.
Yeah, I say that they've got
quite a few.
Yeah, one in Turkish in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Nice.
This one also, Jakarta One LiveStream is really geared towards Jakarta E and MicroProfile together. So it's another good one to get into if you're interested in those two technologies.
Perfect. And then the next one is kind of fun because that is in hometown, right?
It's in Chicago. So Jconf.dev is in person. It's going to be December 8th through December 10th right here in Chicago. And the difference between this one and the other ones is the call for presentations is still open to August 1st. So if you've got an idea of something you want to present, by the time this is published, maybe they'll have extended it and you'll be able
You're going to make me work, Bob.
I want to make you work because we haven't submitted anything yet, and we should. We need.
Yeah, I know. No, we really should.
Excuse to get you here in Chicago. If not, we should do the podcast from there. But yeah, December in Chicago. But it's early December, so it's not terrible.
It's still good.
So if you want to check it out, they've got a great location. The organizers are experienced. They're DevNexus folks. They know what they're doing. It'll be the first in-person Jconf.dev in Chicago. So check it out. If you've got a presentation you want to do, or you just want to attend, should be a really good time.
Is that one at UIC, Bob?
I don't know if there is at UIC this time. I've got to look and see what that's what they were going to do last time. I'm not entirely sure if that's the venue this time around.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah, I wonder.
Lots of tracks,
but it's going to be close to the train. So if you're in the Chicago suburbs and you're commuting into the city and you take the train in, I know the one thing I heard is that the venue is very close to the train station, so you should be able to get there from commuting in, or if you're in the city and in the loop, walking distance.
Awesome. So. Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, no, I think they say that is the Isidore and Sadie Doran Forum, which I think it is in UIC.
Okay, yeah, maybe it is UIC again. I know that's what they were planning for the first one, which they went remote last year, so maybe they just got the same venue. But yeah, that's walking distance from the train station.
That's awesome.
So December 8th through December 10th. Check it out.
Right. And I think that is that is an interesting thing, right? Like a question that we had is like, is that what we're going to be seeing now? A lot of hybrid / in-person?
Yeah, I mean, so like me personally, I'm kind of excited about JConf being in person because, since conferences have gone online or hybrid, like my motivation to speak is actually more just to meet people and talk to people rather than just presenting content online and have it recorded and then be around and have people listen to it. I don't get a lot out of that. So the in-person aspect for me is huge. Hybrid or online presentations, I don't know. That just exhausts me. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think it takes some time to figure out how to master those sorts of conferences. I've definitely attended, like pre-COVID, some virtual conferences that were amazing. But the content sort of has to be tailored to that, and the audience has to kind of be prepared for that level of engagement. I've not enjoyed like a mixed, in-person virtual conference. Like I just learned, seeing my daughter's experience with hybrid school, being at home, it's awful. So I can't imagine that conferences would really be any better, unless like we get augmented reality or something. 10 years down the
Put
line.
on some goggles and you can still see everybody.
100 years from now, of course, we'll have that. So,
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's like almost like supporting both it's an interesting gamble, right? Because on one hand, I guess the in-person is when you're in person, there's other things that come through, especially when it comes to interacting with the audience and getting like audience feedback, which things are very hard to do when you are remote. And if you're trying to entertain both at the same time, it becomes weird that you really have to favor one over the other. Like if you're taking questions, you'll be taking questions from the audience. It's very hard to take questions from the audience and the remote at the same time. But we'll see. I know like most of them are either online or in person, except for JAX London. Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
All right. News. Bob, I'm going to let you drive the news.
You want me to drive it? So I didn't have this one, but Boston Dynamics has been acquired. So those that are not familiar with Boston Dynamics, it's one of those bleeding edge robotics companies. So Hyundai Motor Group has purchased them. We've been covering acquisitions for a while now. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of market consolidation happening in tech right now. But this one's interesting because this was, again, a top tier robotics company getting bought out by an automobile company.
Yeah, that fit didn't feel that weird for me.
No?
Because
I'm waiting for Transformers. There has to be Transformers on this place somewhere.
I've never seen a Hyundai Transformer. That's a new one for me. It's Sonata turning into a
Chevy would buy that so they could convert the Corvette to Bumblebee.
There you go.
But because, like I said, this one wasn't that out of left field for me from that aspect because of Honda has been in the forefront of robotics, specifically bipedal walking robotics for over a decade now. So tit for tat, trying to play, catch up. That made sense to me. The shocking piece of this news for me was the valuation.
Too much,
too little.
Oh.
So Boston Dynamics, they are the YouTube darlings of robotics, right? Everybody knows they're dancing robots and all that kind of the dog, et cetera.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you'd assume a pretty high valuation, but it came in at $1.1 billion.
Which is still a huge profit for SoftBank, though. With the last investor, it was acquired at $200 million within the last 10 years. It actually changed hands 3 times.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, and because it's not a public company, we don't get to see the financials, right. which we talked a little bit about this before the recording. It makes you wonder, is their sales as good as we would have hoped? Probably not.
They're most certainly losing money because they're an R&D company. I would imagine, it might have been like a fire sale type thing, but every single investor from Google X Ventures to SoftBank made money on that acquisition. So, it's just the market isn't as huge as a lot of other startups with $10 billion, $40 billion valuations. It's more of an R&D company.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, the long-term play here, right? We all assume military, et cetera, for this kind of application, government, fire department, police, that kind of thing, search and rescue, et cetera. I think they would probably have a better.
Hopefully. Speaking of military,
Hyundai probably has a better shot at getting into those things than Boston Dynamics by themselves.
Even auto manufacturing is becoming a robotics industry, right? You think about the level of automation that Tesla has done.
They've backed off on that, though.
Tesla has?
Yes, Tesla went
for the self-driving
automated, and Elon Musk actually backed off quite a bit on that with regards to how much automation they did. They realized that there was some things that they're not ready to automate yet.
Right, and they also have GigaPress and other modes of doing automated manufacturing. But I think that it's possible that this company actually completes a piece of the puzzle because these are humanoid robots effectively. And so they're able to do tasks that standard static robots may not be capable of. And that might just be a competitive vertical integration advantage for Hyundai.
If you look at DoorDash, isn't that who has the robots now? Or is it Domino's or something?
The delivery.
Domino's does too.
Delivery car thing.
Yeah,
it's
about
Domino's.
These cars, they're all robotic now.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense. Maybe Hyundai is looking to get more into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the future. I believe that since a child. So we're just finally getting there. Self-driving cars and robots.
Yeah, no, Transformers. That's what I expect to see.
I want to see 3PO.
Yeah.
Instead of driving, we can be watching our movies or whatever we want to do in the car.
Right.
Oh gosh, that would be nice.
We're almost there. 2 more years.
2 more years. Yeah.
No, I'm serious. We're getting to level 3 autonomy pretty soon. Like, you'll still have to be at the steering wheel, but
It's a lot more than 2 years.
2 years for it to be done irresponsibly, and someone will do it irresponsibly. Someone will do it irresponsibly in a country that is less regulated than the United States.
Show me a single demo in snow. Show me a single demo in rain. I haven't seen either one.
I feel like the Tesla full self-driving 9 beta is probably going to be there, or version 10.
I'm just saying, I've never even seen a demo.
Running into white trucks.
Oh no, that was 4 or 5 years ago. If you go online, YouTube FSD V9 beta, it's really impressive. Unprotected left turns. They're able to navigate traffic. The labeling, they give you a mind of car visualization, so you can see how it's labeling various objects in the road.
I tried that though. It's still jerky. It's still very still overreactive.
2,000 people in the universe have access to this.
Okay, so the version that are in the cars right now, or at least as of November.
I've got that version. I would not drive it on the city streets.
Your Honor, I rest my case.
But beta 9, beta 10, and beta 11. Theoretically will be out in the next 12 months, and they'll be at production scale.
Okay, so the question is are the 3 laws of robotics baked into their self-driving algorithm?
What was the question?
The 3 laws of robotics baked in. I mean, which side of the trolley problem are they on? Pull the lever and kill less people, or
blame the driver?
Kill the driver. Kill the driver.
No, just blame the driver. You're still gonna have people
I have a moral choice to make. Just kill whoever is driving me.
I mean, level 5 autonomy is you can sit and watch YouTube or face backwards or do work or something like that. We're approaching level 2, level 3 autonomy, where it does still need to be supervised, but it does most things. So I drove here basically just thumbing a little scroll bar to ensure that I was holding the wheel. But my left turn, right turns, lane changes, navigation here, I didn't have to intervene.
You were almost on the train.
I was basically on the train.
See, when I test drove a Tesla back in November, it wasn't that.
You can test drive mine. It's in the parking lot.
We'll hold in the next episode to make sure Michael's alive.
There's a revision on autonomy.
Live.
Yeah, extras. OffHeap extras.
With that level of autonomy, I would worry about falling asleep at the wheel.
That's happened. Happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened to the point where it actually hasn't killed anyone, but people have passed out, and police will have to figure out a way to pull them over because the car will just keep driving.
Yeah.
Until if you're on nav, then it'll exit and then it's off of autopilot. But yeah, it's gotten good, but it's getting a lot better. It's getting crazy better to the point where you can just be take me to the grocery store. And it'll even find you a parking spot and that sort of thing. It's there. It's just they're trying to iron out some edge cases still.
Rain, snow, Chicago.
They'll probably get some facial recognition, with the eyes shutting, and they'll be able to wake you up.
They already have that.
To wake you up, right?
They have an in-cabin camera that with a closed loop sort of eye tracking system that you can enable optionally.
Yeah.
I could talk for a whole hour and a half on just Tesla. So there's plenty of content on YouTube.
We got more to get to.
FSD.
So I mean, that's one acquisition, and one aspect of that is government contracts. So let's talk about the other side, the flip side of government contracts, and when the government just kind of cancels your contract, as what happened to Microsoft with their big Pentagon cloud contract. So Department of Defense has canceled the the contract to reevaluate AWS versus Azure.
Well, so
is that a surprise or?
Well, so it's not a huge surprise given what happened with the awarding in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. Switching administrations, all of that.
Well, then also just hatred for Jeff Bezos within
I mean,
Jeff. So that was
nobody's hiding the fact that he was rewarded to basically give a big middle finger to Jeff Bezos. But it is interesting though, the grounds that they're canceling it on, which is they say the Jedi will not meet their current requirements. They actually say that they have new requirements that Jedi won't meet. So they're basically starting over from scratch.
But they don't specify what those requirements
Of course not. Come on, man.
It's classified.
Exactly.
Yeah. The requirement is not Azure. Sorry, anyone that works at Microsoft, the requirement is that the documentation actually matches the reality of using the product.
Ooh.
Sorry. It's true. I've worked with Azure a lot. Completeness of vision, amazing. Ability to execute, still has some work.
So, yeah, I've got Azure clients as well. I mean, the good and the bad of it is that you feel like the governance of being in a big company is there in Azure, where in AWS, like, yeah, you've got IAM and where you can specify permissions, but like to really do it enterprise level, Azure has all the bells and whistles. But
really,
and it's probably already integrated with stuff you're already using.
It's Active Directory, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't had that friction, or maybe I'm blind to it, because and this is no secret, like Expedia has an investment on a lot of AWS, and we are integrated. Like we don't, so I haven't feel the pain on that. I think scalability has not been an issue. There are pain points, but I assume that the pain points are common to all cloud providers, not necessarily Amazon.
I mean, sorry. Go ahead, Freddy.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, my specific pain point with Azure, if I were to summarize it in 2 sentences, is I have 5 Microsoft logins: one for Azure DevOps, one for Cloud Console, one for like Microsoft Live 365, and I can never, ever, ever keep track of which login to use for which system. I just pretty much have to plan for trying 5 logins to get into the system that I want. And that's enterprise. So there you go. Mission accomplished.
All right.
All right. So moving on. So this impacted me, but not so much as I look across the room at the 3 Macs that I have in front of me. So I'm on the Windows machine. So there's
I am a Windows guy myself. So.
All right, but you're virtual, Freddy, so I can't see you here. But there was a big Microsoft Windows update. So there was a print driver that allowed access into your system that required a big security patch. That was one where I actually just stopped all my client work and reset my computer and let that download work. It was called the Print something.
Print Spooler.
Print Nightmare, was it?
Oh, yeah. Print
I think
Nightmare.
it was Print Nightmare was the name of it. But basically going through a print driver to get access to your system. And I mean,
that is crazy. For real? That was the vector?
Yeah. I mean, it's a super old code base, right?
That's not a very using printers in general is not a novel vector. I mean,
the security patch is just to like hammer your printer to death. Like, that's when you solve that problem.
Printers are notoriously vulnerable on networks anyways, using default passwords and those kinds of things. So, using that as a beachhead on a network to then launch further attacks is common.
It's like
the driver angle is on an actual laptop. That's the interesting thing.
But it's a remote code execution vulnerability.
Right,
I mean,
this is
privileged file operations.
Oh yeah.
Going through the print spooler.
Yeah.
So Windows print spooler is the attack vector here. Could then install programs, view change, delete data. So you can do anything.
So it was funny. This is so salient because when I was in high school and there was like this network, they were installing the printers and there was a problem with like Windows. This was Windows for workgroups. I don't know.
Boy.
NT
that 3.11.
For work groups.
Yeah. So something was wrong, and I remember one of like the IT guys there. I was a student at the school. It's like, oh, maybe there's a virus in the driver, and that's how they got in. And I'm like, that is almost impossible. Again, this was 1994. So I can't believe that I have to come full circle now and admit that, yes, there could be a virus in the driver.
I mean, it was probably like an attack. It was an attack surface back then. It just wasn't the lowest hanging fruit.
It was just
exactly. Windows 3.11.
No, I completely agree. Well, again, back in those days, there was, even the internet, quote unquote, was not as pervasive as it is now, right? So So
the main thing is if you have Windows, patch your system.
Install and reboot.
This is an update you want to take now.
By
It's
taking
also-
your Windows laptop, dropping it in the trash, going to the Apple Store, buying a Mac.
There you go.
And
Don't do that.
All right, sorry.
There's
I don't know why not.
I'm
You
throwing
inherit other
grenades tonight.
problems.
I'm sorry.
See,
I'm
now
sorry.
I carry a Mac and Windows, so
There you
like
go.
it's not better. It's really not.
All right, I'll stop throwing grenades.
All right.
So important to note, though, real
that Control and Windows key function swap that you have to do every time you switch to the Mac it always trips me up. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So next news item. So GitHub Copilot has been released, but not without controversy. So who can give like just a summary of what Copilot does? I mean, the biggest thing is it's exposing code.
Yeah, so it'll generate functions.
It's autocomplete.
It's a lot more than
A lot more
autocomplete.
than autocomplete.
Yeah, it's a whole lot more than
It's like,
autocomplete.
it's like an intent-driven autocomplete where, yeah.
So it uses AI to generate essentially functions based on, I think you put a little documentation step, right, on describing what you want.
Yeah. So like, for example, the demo that I saw is you could create a function like sort by last name.
Right.
And it will fill in based on the context of what it's seen in the rest of your code, an actual function implementation to do just that. Or maybe you start by like taking an argument of an array and it'll look for a property called first name or last name and add a sort function to it. And the problem is that its training set is all of GitHub, any public repository. And the problem is it's so good, or at least so effective at pattern matching, that whole functions from actual like publicly exposed software is made available, but they don't pay attention to the licenses. So you could have unlicensed software, you could have GPL licensed software in there, and there's enough of the code snippet included in many of its suggestions where it would be sort of in a gray area of an IP issue.
Right.
Well, let's be careful here. So GitHub says that from an actual like this code appears in another repository and we generated it. They said that's happened less than 1% of the time. I think it's 0.1%.
That's still pretty substantial if you write a lot of code.
If you write a lot of code, like if every repository in GitHub was using this, that's a serious amount. This is still a very new product. Not a lot of places are using it. But also like, to your point, it doesn't provide any type of indemnity thing. So like they use that as a training data set. Yeah. But then there's no the code it generates isn't licensed in a way that you can freely use it.
And there's no attribution either. So you don't know where that code is coming from or what influenced it. And there's actually like sort of a similar intellectual property challenge now with generative music, where you're using AIs that listen to a whole jazz library and figure out some patterns, invent some stuff. And then the question is, well, is that copyrightable, right? Yeah. What if you have an AI that generates every possible permutation of a viable jazz song and you copyright all those things, right? And really like this sort of introduces this problem of how AI affects intellectual property rights, because usually like humans have an intent, like I'm going to steal this, I'm going to go look at this library, they know it's GPL and I'm going to include it. Machines don't have that unless you program it in.
Well, and the sad part about the machine part is you could actually add some traceability here to say this is where we're drawing it from,
but
right?
You can't. So that's
maybe,
the other problem.
But it's weird, right? Because like that's a problem with neural networks, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like if that is what it's based on, you lose the intent somewhere. Like the only answer you can get is I was trained by the data set.
Right. And this is the problem is like with a lot of these deep neural networks, like it's gotten to the point where you can't quite understand the attribution. There was an anti-fraud system that I think a Stripe engineer was explaining at Strangeloop, where it got really good at detecting patterns of fraud, but then they couldn't ever justify why the fraud occurred. And so they actually wrote a post hoc system to guess based on a decision tree why the AI arrived at that. And what was interesting about that is it's sort of like what we do as humans. We act and then we go to therapy to analyze why we acted some way. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're like, how do you create a finite attribution for something like that?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess what it really comes down to is, so maybe it's a 10th of a percentage of the things that are a problem. But again, if that's GPL, the implications of that, if now my code base has to be GPL because it's an infectious license, it's a big deal.
And you write like 1,000 functions with that, and you're more statistically likely to have at least one
to hit it.
breaches.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's, you know, a lot of these things come down to legal precedents and whether a judge is going to judge that to be infringement or not, because I mean, we've talked about copyright quite a bit on the show, and the one thing we've learned is it's kind of one of those engineering problems. It depends on a lot of different contexts, but if you're copying code from this and your context falls unfavorably,
but
you could be in trouble.
And then so the question I have is like, where is that threshold? Like because like, you know, I can look at open source code, I can sort of like digest it and say like, oh, they're doing sorted in a fun way, or maybe they did something clever on the way they stream something. And then like, I'm going to do this like, quote unquote, exactly the same thing on my particular problem space. It's sort of like a trick that I picked up, but I'm not copying that code and just saying like, oh, I'm just going to concatenate streams and do min, max, whatever it is. So it's, how do you know?
You don't.
And then how do you enforce?
You don't. I mean, you enforce arbitrarily, but you don't know. Like I could have heard some little riff in a song and incorporated that into an album that hits the top 10 and they get sued like that. There was like the Blurred Lines lawsuit against the Marvin Gaye estate.
That's why you license Queens under pressure forever.
Ed Sheeran also got sued by the Martin Gaye estate. They're very litigious, apparently. But yeah, and like it's really up to the judge and how they're feeling. And in many cases, these are jury cases. And so
I mean, it's absolutely something we got to keep an eye on. You know, if it becomes the new Stack Overflow, you know, your interns are going to be copying codes from that. But, you know, speaking of interns, does anybody get an email from HBO over the last month?
Yep.
I got one of those.
Integration test number one was an amazing series, in my opinion. Like it was really that cliffhanger.
You know what? They could have milked that to be like the next Silicon Valley show.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, did they not? I feel like they did, right? Like that intern, like the fact that it's just known as the intern, that guy could have been, or girl could have been famous.
Yes. We're infamous. I don't know if you really
I don't know. So, I mean, it's actually
the first person to chime in was Monica Lewinsky talking about like interns being scapegoats. So, I mean,
Oh gosh, no, that went around the world.
So do we need to give some context to our listeners on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel it was late June that a email was sent out to the entire database of HBO listeners. So I actually a subscriber.
I actually just pulled up the email.
Oh, here you go.
Yeah. So literally basically all of the HBO Max subscribers, the email, there was an email sent. Subject was integration test email number 1. The content, the body was this template is used by integration tests only, but it was sent obviously to everybody that subscribes to HBO Max, kind of a big distribution list. Yeah. And it's one of those things that you could have laughed off. Like somebody screwed up.
I did.
I did too.
Funny.
The only reason I have it is because like you said, it's funny. But what made this actually, in my opinion, more of a news story is the fact that they actually then blamed the intern.
Yeah.
It's like,
they didn't dox the intern, but like
it's like, come on.
I don't know if it was just done in jest to go in. Like I didn't think it was like, oh my gosh, there was like the way it was answered. I always thought it was just like, yeah, it was an intern. Ha ha ha. Move on. I don't know if the like it's like HBO official like this. The reason all this trouble happened because there was an unsupervised intern. I think it was.
Well, but imagine if you're that intern. Like, how are you feeling about HBO Max tweeting out your mistake?
You are, but like they didn't identify him. Like, you know, it's common joke is if you like project, blame the consultants if anything goes wrong. I mean,
right. Like
those are people that are paid appropriately to take that kind of blame. And like, come on, it's a college kid.
Right.
Like there's no like
or a high school kid.
Yeah, exactly. Know. Like I was the intern. Blaming the intern is inexcusable. in my opinion. It's just it is.
Right.
It is.
Like it's a sign of a dysfunctional or partially dysfunctional engineering culture when you have an opportunity to say like, hey, there was a systemic failure here. We should not have had that distribution list exposed to anyone. The CTO could have made that mistake. Right. And so like when you scapegoat the intern, then you lose the opportunity.
And that's you see, and that's what I failed to follow, because like this is like if HBO had made a press release saying, look, the problems that came so like what happened with Atlassian and having an unlock build server that spilled out the whatever it was the RSA keys, right? That I'll say yes, that was completely blamed. I think this was done in jest, in the sense that should they have done it? Maybe not. I agree with that. Is it but I don't want to escalate it to the point where, oh my gosh, HBO just threw the intern under the bus on their specific response to this crisis. Like I don't think it was like that. It was I mostly said it was immature. Slap on the wrist, just don't do it again. But I wouldn't just say like, oh my gosh, there's a culture problem on HBO. Like that, I don't think it goes that like that kind of punishment doesn't fit the crime that they did.
Although I would argue that there is a culture problem within the engineering community at large. I've observed things like that. I've been both the subject and the perpetrator. I've been both the plaintiff and the defendant on those situations in the past in our career. And I think it does spark a larger discussion about how we assign blame and how we process failure. And, like the most appropriate way to respond to that might have been the highest up person that was involved in any way accepts the blame, right? Yeah. Like if this were a Japanese culture, like company, that would most likely be the way that they would handle it.
Yeah. And again, what message is this? As the highest person, on the team, what message are you sending to your team when something goes wrong by saying we're going to put out a press release that blames an abstract intern,
blame somebody else?
Yeah. The blames an abstract no, that's not the way to.
Again, you're thinking this is a fully like the way that you're making it sound, or the way that it's being portrayed is like this was an official press release response to a crisis on HBO, which it wasn't. It was a tweet reply. Yeah, it was an intern. Like again, it's and to say that support that the intern got from the community, because we all been there, has been amazing. So it's again, it's how much you want to push back on something that I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but again, I don't think it's HBO making a real response. I think it was done in the jest that everybody was just playing with it. Maybe HBO should have kept quiet or made another response.
I mean, I think the way it turned, on social media and other places, it kind of made it into more of a joke than actually something serious. The intern wasn't exposed, but I think there's examples of where that doesn't happen and the blame ends up falling on somebody. Yeah. Or maybe, the culture actually creates, or perpetuates the problem even more. Like our next news item where we're talking about Google and the gender bias lawsuit. So, I mean, you're talking about Google that used to be, a lot of people viewed it as kind of a gold standard in the industry. They've got some cultural problems of their own to deal with.
Yeah, well, and I think what's interesting about this lawsuit or the acceptance of the class action for sort of consideration by the courts is that you can hold both of those truths at the same time, right? Like Google, in my mind, is sort of my spirit animal on aspects of inclusiveness and awareness and psychological safety. They published, Project Aristotle on psychological safety. It has influenced my management style. But this lawsuit signals that there's still a lot more work to do, right? And I think that what's been disappointing to me is the way that Google has responded, right? Like the fact that they're investing so much time in inclusion and diversity should signal that they're like, oh yeah, no, that's screwed up, right? and then look at the data and be like, okay, here's some things that we're going to do to change. The problem is when you're sued, you know, your lawyer is going to tell you not to
clam
do that.
up. And
I lost some respect for Google by not at least acknowledging the problem. They jumped to like, sort of like, well, we have all these examples of people that have had a different experience, but
really quick,
look at the data. Yeah.
Really quick. I don't think we actually gave context on what this.
Yes, we have been doing that on this.
We transitioned really well into the argument. What exactly are you talking about?
So there was a class action lawsuit filed by an engineer named Kelly Ellis and a few other women engineers at Google. And this class action lawsuit started in 2017 and made the claim based on an independent audit from, I think it was the state of California, to examine like pay equity. And they found that there was a discrepancy of men and women holding the same title getting compensated. I think it was a gap of somewhere around like $16,000 per year. States, yeah. And unfortunately, there isn't like more detailed information than that. But there was a class action lawsuit filed by these engineers, claiming pay inequity and discrimination. And that was in 2017. And just recently, the class action was accepted by the courts and will be heard. It has not been ruled on yet, but it does signal that, Google has some pay equity problems. Like, it's one thing to say there's a lack of pay equity in like a 20-person organization. It's another thing to say there's a lack of pay equity in like a 20,000 plus person campus in Mountain View.
Let's be careful on how we word this. This doesn't. All this says is that we need to determine whether or not they've got the pay equity. Like,
right.
The fact it's been certified as a class, which.
But so I don't think the data.
Nobody's been found guilty or in a court.
Right. Oh, sure. And I should say,
so be careful
on the surface, there appears to be, based on the numbers and the data that the state of California was using, some level of bimodal distribution and pay. Whether or not there's an explanation for
whether
that,
it's malicious
or whether it's intentional, remains to be seen. There's all sorts of unconscious bias. I first learned about the term
because that is the part that makes it like criminal. Like if it was intentional or they were aware of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that they're like 9 times out of 10, these sorts of things aren't intentional, right? But they're also like, they're driven by people with biases, and like the programs that you introduce and the observability and visibility that you introduce to the organization to check these things is really what makes the difference.
It's the culture that prevents it, or the culture that allows it. And in this case,
or the culture that seeks to change the things that are just sort of systemic in the engineering community at large. That's the other challenge.
I mean, they're stating it's a significant problem. So
it is.
This close analysis case is seeking more than 600 million in damages.
Right.
So class action status, you can go across anybody at Google that has faced similar discrimination. If you're able to assess that's over 600 million.
Well, they're representing really 11. Yeah, I think they're representing 11,000 engineers.
Almost 11,000.
So like on average, that's not, as substantial for Google scale. So,
it actually falls very close to the realm of being underpaid by about 16 to 20,000.
Yeah. And I think the sort of the thing that's challenging about this is they're Google. And Google clearly has a diversity and inclusion program. They publish diversity reports every year, and they're Google. They're data people. It's surprising to me that they didn't know this before the state of California knew this. And I don't think that you can change these things overnight per se. But the fact that they're saying no, that's not true, that's questionable to me.
Yeah, that's what's going to make it hard for Google to argue this. That their side is because, to your point, I'm sure Google's all about the numbers. If it's not numbers, it doesn't exist.
I'm sure
they knew this.
I'm sure Google's got some neural net that figured out pay, and they can't explain why. And they've added some sort of like
it's like the system told us this, right? All right, I think we need to go to our discussion topic so we can finish it at top of the hour and a half, I guess. Who put this one in?
Michael's been our news guy for this entire month, so this is one that's top of mind for me too.
Yeah, I can take it. So right to repair. So this is where I came across this issue was, I believe it was Nebraska. Don't quote me on that. But there was a law that was passed. I was reading about this a while ago. And on farming, in farms, on agricultural worlds, there are a lot of farmers need to be able to repair their own tractors. You know, it is cost ineffective to lug a $20,000 tractor that weighs 10 tons to the local shop when you're talking potentially 100 miles to the local repair shop. Yeah. It is impractical to do that. Yet there has been a concerted effort by specifically John Deere is the one that is typically called out for this, to require exactly that they when you buy a tractor from John Deere, they essentially, you are leasing the software on it. You do not have the right to repair your tractor. You must come back to us, John Deere, to repair that. Yeah. And like I said, I don't quote me that it was Nebraska. I'm going to throw this out there though. There was a state, I forget, it was it was in the Midwest. It was, Midwest, Great Plains, somewhere in there. That tried passing a law enabling these farmers the right to repair their tractors. And all of a sudden, there was all kinds of bigwigs from Silicon Valley flying in, having problems with this law. Yeah. Apple, Facebook, Google, all were sending lobbyists like, wait a minute, you can't do this. And like, wait a minute, what does this have to do with tractors? Why do you care? Right. And it leads to a bigger problem, which President Biden, which comes to the most recent, the reason we're bringing this up now, President Biden is ordering that the FTC will create a right to repair rules. And the reason for this is because when you buy most electronic devices these days, whether it be anything from your phone to your router, to your computer, to your car, to anything that has proprietary electronic components on it, typically you are signing, or by purchasing it, you are accepting an agreement that says that you do not own the software that's running on it. You have to go back. You have to basically follow certain rules to repair that device, or you're violating your warranty, et cetera, et cetera.
But it's not only that you're violating your warranty; it's that we will break your device to the point where you can't use it, which is different than
potentially depending on who it is.
The shop.
Yes. Yeah. And this has a long history in America, at least. This goes all the way back to car manufacturing, where it's the whole reason that most cars are not sold through corporate-owned car dealerships, is because back when cars were becoming a thing that's everybody, people wanted to, again, repair their own cars. And so there were laws passed basically requiring that auto manufacturers enable independent companies to be able to do that. That's why they actually, as part of that process, they actually broke the sales dealership model apart from the actual manufacturing process. Now, I've actually been surprised to see how well Tesla's been able to avoid that up to this point.
Tesla's tricky. I mean, like
they're skirting.
I would not want to take some open source firmware and put it on my car and potentially introduce a security vulnerability. That's an area where it's like a life and death device. And just like I wouldn't want to hack my pacemaker, I probably don't want to hack my car.
I'm not talking. So Cedric, I have an update for your Tesla driving. It's version 12. Driving software.
So Tesla versioning is very confusing, but the full self-driving beta, they just released 9. They were on 8 for a super long time. But then there's the OS version, which is like 11 or 12 or something like that. There's different components with different versioning. They haven't adopted like a uniform.
But I'm not talking about going back to the car thing. I'm not talking about I don't want to install Android on my car, right. but I do want to be able to go to Goodyear instead of pay those rates as opposed to Audi to pay their rates.
Well, and Tesla doesn't require that you go to Tesla to change your tires. They don't require that you go to Tesla until very recently. They didn't have body repair in glass and collision, so you could go there for that. But anything that and this is part of the challenge. This is the counterpoint with right to repair. By the way, I'm a huge proponent of right to repair in general. Is that things are becoming so integrated and so miniaturized that sometimes it can be both dangerous for someone to do that without access to the right information, without access to official parts, without access to the schematics. And it can also be, it can leak intellectual property as well. So if I were looking to repair an iPhone,
you can patent things and prevent intellectual property theft without and still expose
in the United States,
The right to repair.
right?
Yeah.
most of the world.
I would say that like
Most of
areas
the world,
like-
most of the world that are going to be buying the devices we're
It's
talking
coming
about.
when I
China.
start
Like,
trying to
yeah.
sell your technology, not
Well,
if
and
I try to understand it.
exactly.
Because for a patent, I have to provide the government with
So there's
design.
there's patents and there's trade secrets, right? And so
Trade
there's
secrets
a
is
lot
different.
like the
Right.
recipe of Coca-Cola, right?
Is a
If I
trade
allowed
secret.
someone to like
Right.
repair
Not
Coca-Cola, it's a terrible analogy. I'm sorry, audience. But like,
But no, it's right. It's
I
the
mean,
right
but
one.
it's not
so-
a patent.
it's not a patent, and a lot of these integration patterns may not necessarily be patentable, right? They might have more to do with just like design mechanisms that they wouldn't necessarily want to expose. Now, this is the argument, as best I understand it, from the opponents of right to repair. I really don't agree with that. Like, I think that, you know, the barriers to entry are not just legally what you're allowed to do with the software, because when you accept a license, you accept a license, right? Like, if I accept a GPL license, I can't just change it to Apache because I disagree with GPL or I want to do something with GPL that the licensee didn't agree to. But the challenge is that, like, are you familiar with Juicero? So this was like a Keurig for juice, right?
Okay.
And it was absurdly expensive. It was like $500. And you would buy these little juice pods and you put them in your juicer and it would make juice for you. And it turned out it was a whole bunch of crap, but like the company went out of business, right? And you couldn't repair the device. You couldn't find parts for it. You couldn't connect to like verify the QR code or anything like that. It was just a brick. And those things happen in technology. And if we don't have any sort of alternatives for repairing our own stuff, one, the cost could go up. Two, the access could go down. So similar to like driving your tractor over to John Deere that's 100 miles away, and then not having access to your tractor during that period of time as well. And so I think there is a certain level of antitrust and consumer protection that needs to be in place in this new world of highly integrated, highly miniaturized components. But eventually, like, I can't repair my M1 Mac by putting more RAM in it because the RAM is soldered, right?
That's not repair, though. That's not repair. You can repair it. You can
replace the SSD.
Yes, you can get a new board and you can repair it. It can be replaced
by Apple, but like I can't necessarily get the control board. And this is so we can't go 15 minutes talking about right to repair without referencing Louis Rossmann. Go check out his YouTube channel. He runs a repair shop in New York and like spends time actually like under a microscope analyzing how he's worked around issues to repair Macs. But a lot of times it's the fact that like if I wanted to replace a main board or a screen that's highly integrated in a Mac, I don't have access to the part. The only way that I'd be able to do that is if I have a salvaged MacBook that I can extract that from. And so that's part of the problem. Because it's all integrated, it isn't interchangeable. But the challenge is like this MacBook, and I'm sorry for the audience that can't see a MacBook, but just imagine a MacBook in your head. It wouldn't be this light and this thin if not for that integration and miniaturization. So like as we march through time and more things get highly integrated and highly miniaturized,
But that's
what you're describing is something different. That's not
very
right to repair.
narrow case.
That's not right to
but
repair.
it's an increasing case.
It is an increasing case, but I guess like the part that I'm focusing on is the same part that like other kind of people are pushing on. Like so Wozniak, an Apple guy, kind of came out for right to repair recently.
Totally,
and his statement was not focusing on the miniaturization, the specialization of Apple, but the fact that a lot of Apple software was built on open source things that were available, but yet still somehow covered under these right to repair laws. Like if it's open source, there's licenses out there that are liberal licenses that says my car has Android in it.
Right, but
like,
that's the hazard.
I should be able to do something about
but that's the hazard of a permissive license like Apache or MIT is that the creators accept that risk, right? And because they accept that risk, the works that they've produced spread in a lot more places than they would have, you know. And so it's just a question of like, what do those creators really care about at that point?
But what you're describing with the repairing of a Mac is different from what like right repair really is. It's not that I can't get the parts. It's that even if I can, I'm not allowed to do it.
Well, what happens?
That's a big difference.
No, and I mean, so
I'm legally not allowed to. I'm legally not allowed to. Even if I can get an Apple part, I am legally not allowed to be the person that swaps it.
Totally, and I think that's BS. Like, I think that is a ridiculous requirement on the part of John Deere. Full disclosure, I work for a company whose customer is John Deere, but I think that is a hazardous thing to do, because it flies in the face of tinkerers. It flies in the face of ownership. Like, I can't get the latest Photoshop and just own it forever, right? Like, I have to pay.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
Right, and it's the same sort of thing with hardware now. I am less likely to go buy an album on CD. I can't necessarily even get 9624 kilohertz content in most of the music that I want to listen to. I have to pay for a subscription. I have to pay for Tidal. I have to pay for Spotify. Yep. And that's the way that we're starting to treat physical goods. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, the example that going back to the John Deere example, that before this President Biden order came out, that I had read about was, John Deere tractors, a lot of them are very, smart, right?
Yeah.
They have GPS on it. So they had an example of a farmer who the GPS module on his tractor had died. Yeah. He had one that he
excellent. Yeah, like
he had actually gotten his hands on one.
Yeah.
Part. Exactly. Yeah. He wasn't allowed to swap it out.
Yeah.
Even he's like, I can physically put it up there. Yeah. It needs to be activated.
Right.
And, and John Deere is the only place to activate it, and they won't, and they wouldn't do it unless they're the ones that put a brand new part on. Yeah. And the catch was that they didn't make that part anymore. He got it through as a used part.
Oh yeah, that's the Juicero use case.
He has a working part.
Yeah.
He has a tractor. He can even put the two together, but he can't make them work because John Deere says we're not going to support that anymore.
Right. Yeah, and that's like Juicero going away, right? Like it's and I think I don't know John Deere's argument in this case, but I can't think of a defensible argument for justifying that.
I mean, I bought it. I know I bought the exact same thing when I bought my car. We bought an Audi e-tron and all of these smart, like the app integrated stuff on it in the agreement that in this bill of sale that I signed said we guarantee support for 10 years. Yeah. After that, we reserve the right to shut it down. So everything that I use my phone for, like to check charging and to check, like all the cool things that I spent a lot of money on. Yeah. After 10 years, they're gone.
I mean,
they could be,
but that's what I feel should be illegal.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I agree with you.
That's the case of I shouldn't be touching it. I don't understand it. I'm willing to concede those if I get the right to do the things that are obvious. And maybe that's where it becomes kind of like some of these software
but
cases.
This isn't
it's not even
copyright. It's
well, it's like video games.
It's not even an obvious thing. It's I own it, so I should be able to tinker with it.
Right. But in the case of the connected car, right? Yeah. Like what they might be saying is in 10 years, we're not going to support the online platform that this car relies on. Right. And that happens all the time when video games shut down their like sort of like multiplayer thing. Having Google Reader and probably
a $50
products.
A $50 video game is a little different than
but you shouldn't be allowed to say single player won't work.
Right. Well, but are they saying you're not going to be able to drive your car or that you're not able to use the smart features?
That you won't be able to use the smart features.
I mean, like and it's hard for a manufacturer to say in perpetuity we're going to support.
But you're also not allowed.
It doesn't say about support.
Creates a patch, that can hook you into the new system. Yeah. That's not allowed.
Yeah. I can't create a third party. I can't create a third party service that keeps it going.
Like my iPad 1, I can't keep that thing going.
Well,
because
and so
no patches for it.
So without reading the EULA, I guess like the question is, after 10 years, that they say, we're guaranteeing support for 10 years. Are they also saying that you can't use a third-party platform as an alternative?
I can't tinker, right?
I can't install the patch.
What's that?
I don't own the software. I'm leasing the software. I can't put the patch.
But is there a provision in the EULA that says that you can't point it at? Like the example, let's say AWS goes away, God forbid, and you have a whole bunch of stuff tied to the S3 API, right? Mm-hmm. When you sign up for AWS, are you saying that you cannot use another service that mirrors the S3 API? Right, or are they saying we're guaranteeing
API contract?
But this isn't a copyright thing. This isn't a copyright.
You can like for example, like this reminds me a lot of like if you have a modern printer.
But they also based on court cases, if somebody were to copy the S3 API and you're just repointing your host name,
but there's a difference between a service and a thing, and we're conflating the two.
Right.
AWS is providing a service, which means you're paying for a point in time. I bought a thing.
Right.
So as long as that thing exists, I should be able to expect it to work.
Like for example, that's
the gotcha. That's the gotcha.
But that's the gotcha.
That's
the
problem.
challenge with integration, right? So like, can you operate a car without that smart connectivity?
Not with all its features.
Right. Not with, and I don't know how you do that, like in perpetuity as a company in a way that is not lying to your customers. Like, are you going to be driving that e-tron in the year 2042? I sure as hell hope not. Not as far as like the smart features are concerned and the battery life that's like left as the alternative and the drivetrain improvements and the navigational system and that sort of thing. Like, eventually, in reality, that stuff will be outmoded.
But what about going back to the original example, the John Deere thing?
So let's go back to a simpler example, right? Like if you buy a printer today, you are locked into the cartridges that they produce, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Like there is, and this is a new development. Like before 5 or 10 years ago, there was like third-party competitors because ink is ink.
Yeah.
Right. And on today, right now, you know, if you try to apply those arguments, it's like, oh gosh, it has to be original, or you know, we want just to prevent you from brewing other coffee that could damage the machine because Keurigs there was a version of the Keurig that had the same sort of like lock-in into cartridges.
Yep.
It goes into a place where no, what you're trying to do is very obvious, which is trying to prevent, like, it should be my choice. Like if I decide to,
well, and the libertarian argument, let me put this out there. I'm not a libertarian, but a libertarian would say the market decides. So you have a choice not to buy the HP printer. You have the choice not to buy the Lexmark. I don't think Lexmark even exists anymore. The problem is when there's a cartel. And every printer manufacturer is doing that.
You can't turn anywhere.
But look at HP right now. I can buy generic print cartridges for my HP. They're going to say, well, yeah, they're not going to last as long. They're not as good as ours. But that's totally fine. I can still buy that. It's available to me on the market. If we have no right to repair and no right to replace that with a generic alternative, I mean, you get the same things in medicine. No, I mean, it's actually a similar use case.
And so I agree with you. I think we're violently agreeing.
Yeah.
I don't know John Deere's full perspective, but I can't imagine a way in which they can defend what they're doing to farmers. I can't imagine a way that Canon or whoever's doing the CRM with ink cartridges can defend, other than we're squeezing our customers.
Yeah.
But right to repair is a very large spectrum, and these scenarios aren't necessarily all equivalent, right? And I think that's what possibly happened in Nebraska, the Great Plains state, with that law is that the law was weak and broad enough to expose some level of liability to other companies, right? Like it could have been a well-intended law that was just poorly executed, and that without reading the law and without understanding the arguments of like all the other Silicon Valley,
they did end up that the state. If I remember the thing, I am, for the record, I'm looking, trying to find what state that was, but that state did end up rewriting their law to be very, very, very specific to track,
which is legislation. Like that's kind of what happens. But
so it was there were 20 farm heavy states. Nebraska was one of them.
Yeah. I think the other aspect of right to repair is the aspect of e-waste, and I think I can call out Apple for this one, right? Like Apple talks about removing like the power adapter in the iPhone, but like the biggest way,
and adding 4 dongles when they do.
Right. But the biggest way for them to eliminate e-waste is to make it easier to like improve the longevity of older phones, and they're not doing that by creating like both license restrictions and also preventing access to information and parts, right? So if they really did want to commit to that strategy, this is the way to do it. And my prediction is in a year, as the wind starts blowing in a different direction.
Cedric, are you saying that Apple is doing planned obsolescence?
No, I'm not saying that. I would never say that, Freddy. No, yes, I am. Yes, I am. I totally am. But I think you're like, whether or not you do that is sort of like, that is a business strategy that could bite you. In the case of like consumers having other choice to other platforms, there's certainly a gravity there toward, the Apple ecosystem you're already in. But what I'm saying is that it's also hypocritical to do that and the same time say we're having courage by removing the power adapter from the iPhone that you just bought. When you, like the last iPhone that you have may have a cracked screen that you can't repair, or may have a faulty GPU that you can't repair for more than the cost of a new phone, right? Like that would be the way to solve it. And they're not doing that. They're not addressing that. Yeah, because I was like being a fanboy to Apple earlier, I needed to attack them in some way.
But I think that, and I know we are on top of the hour. I think for, in terms of technology, and I think for us, for the majority of geeks, having the right to repair, it's almost like culturally it was something that we took for granted for the longest time, and it's kind of nice to see that there might be some federal help on keeping that open for us to keep tinkering with what we love to tinker with.
Yeah, we'll keep everybody posted on where these rules. Yeah. So the headline here is that President Biden will order the FTC to create rules.
Right.
So we'll keep you posted on what those rules actually look like.
Yeah.
In the meantime, follow Louis Rossman. He's got some really good content on the subject.
All right, and I think with that we did a marathonic coverage of like a lot of topics. I'm actually surprised we actually managed to cover almost everything we wanted to cover. Yeah, I think with that, that's the end of this episode. I'm so glad you guys got together in person. I'm gonna write an IOU because I need to fly to Chicago and actually do that another one.
You're good here, Freddie. Hey, we had all the beer here. We're just.
I know. God, it breaks my heart.
Got our check for today.
Thank you, Cedric.
You can call me like a pseudo sponsor.
Cedric sponsored this episode.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Well, this is Freddy signing off.
All right, Bob signing off.
Josh signing off.
Michael signing off. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OffHeap. Also on YouTube, like, share, comment, and subscribe, please.
Cedric signing off, and Michael, you're welcome to that.
All right. We did it, guys. I didn't know it was going to work, but it did.
We got it to work.